What makes a good program? As SAS programmers, we create hundreds, possibly thousands of tables, listings, graphs, analysis data sets, and some might have done tool development such as creating macros. But are any of these programs that we create actually good? And those programs that we have created, which we thought, that's a good program, what about that program made it good? Now, we try to collect quality metrics on these, but how do you create metrics relating to quality? Today I'm going to talk about software quality factors, which are qualitative measures of determining quality. It includes a wide range of factors, many of which won't be talked about today. However, this will cover quality factors such as correctness, efficiency, understandability and maintainability, timeliness, robustness, reusability and portability. There are many more software quality factors, things that may not be so relevant to us in SAS programming in the pharmaceutical industry, such as security, maybe even completeness. So, firstly, correctness. Probably the most important factor considered in pharmaceutical SAS programming. Correctness should be measured in two ways, not just the first way, which is the most common way which we look at it. Does the program have correct specifications, and does the program match these? This is generally what we cover when we do our double programming and other quality checks. The second measure of correctness is, does the program meet its requirements and fulfill its purpose? A program that doesn't do what its intention is, or what the customer needs it to do, is that truly a quality program? If we was asked for a demographic summary and we produce an AE listing, the AE listing might be completely correct. However, is this of a top quality if it doesn't do what it needs to do? Efficiency. Efficiency is a factor based on how much system resources the program uses. When we think about efficiency, what comes to mind is runtimes. However, runtimes are a byproduct that can be used to give us some indication of efficiency, but it doesn't tell us the whole story. Efficiency is based on the whole system resources, so memory usage may not affect runtime. However, this affects efficiency. Lots of work data sets, not clear enough formats, macro variables to a lesser extent, take up memory usage, and if the system runs out of virtual memory, then we have a problem. Understandability and maintainability. Understandability is the measure of how easily the program code can be understood. However, maintainability is concerned with how easily the program can be updated with any changes or enhancements. There are very strong links between understandability and maintainability, and they complement each other well to an extent. However, there are some differences. If changes to one element of the code results in edits throughout the program, the code can have a low maintainability, but it's still easily understandable. For example, in an output program, we need to change the subset of an AE dataset. If this results in adding the subset in 3 or 4 times within the code, then this isn't very maintainable. There's quite a low level of modularity there. However, the code may be simple, well commented, and easily understandable, but more difficult to maintain because it results in many places being changed. as mentioned, a modular approach can really aid in this. Timeliness. Timeliness assesses whether the program is delivered on schedule. This is often not thought of as a factor, as surely we must deliver on time. However, there are elements to consider. Is significant benefit to delivering ahead of schedule? Is the delivery date in line with when it's required? So timeliness, so we've got to hit our deadline. However, if we can deliver 3 days early, if that's significant benefit, then then timeliness is very important, and we like to get it out as early as possible. However, if the deliverable is not required for a week and it's sitting there not being used, we could perhaps use that time to do something better or work on more quality factors other than timeliness. So these individual elements can aid in determining the importance of timeliness. Robustness. The robustness is the ability of the program to handle unexpected conditions. So this is something that we deal with a great deal. We are always programming on incomplete data, so we're going to have our full set of data at database lock. So new data, dirty data, working on that data before it's fully cleaned. And in terms of writing macros and tools, we could have unexpected macro parameter values if we're producing a macro for a wider audience. There are various methods employed to enhance robustness that we can use to increase the quality of the robustness, such as defensive programming for the dirty data, dynamic and generic coding for the new data that may come up, so visits that we don't have now that we might have in the future, parameters, ensuring all of our parameters are there. In all cases, meaningful user-defined error messages are very useful and can, rather than erroring with the SAS errors, especially in macros, can be quite difficult to debug. And appropriate exception handling. In terms of dirty data that's unexpected, an appropriate exception handling rule might be to output a log message to warn the user that there's this dirty data. However, if there's unexpected macro parameter values that would cause the program to run incorrectly, a more appropriate exception handling rule might be to exit the program. Okay, to reusability. Reusability is a very difficult quality factor. It's difficult to create a program that's reusable, and even more difficult to test reusability when we come to testing for the quality of the program in terms of reusability, as we need to know the knowledge of the future. However, reuse, when we look at reuse, we don't have to look at it and say, can this program be picked up and used for something else? We can just look at part of the program. That reuse can just be even just the prop report at the end, if it's set up in a way where we can reuse that for all outputs and slightly tweak it. Here again, as previously mentioned, modularization can aid in reusability. Identifying potential areas for reuse and encapsulating them, maybe in macro or just a section of code that can make them easily transferable to new programs. And lastly, portability. Portability looks at whether the code is system, platform, or SAS version dependent. This is becoming increasingly relevant in submitting programs to health authorities, or perhaps for a CRO writing programs for another company, which will then be transferred onto the sponsor system. And and ran. Even if the code is not completely standalone and written in that way, which may not always be the best way to do things. If we was to write every single program to make it standalone code that can then be sent off, that might cause inefficiencies in the way that we work. But even if it's not completely standalone, just encapsulating or segregating or just highlighting with some comments any dependent code can ease the porting process and boost portability. So how do we test for these software quality factors? They're not quantitative, so we can't collect metrics on them. They're very qualitative. So testing as a result can be, well, very subjective. It's especially notable with factors such as maintainability, understandability and reusability. For instance, maintainability and understandability, some people might like, some people code in a certain way. Lots of use of ProcSQL for some people, myself especially, I think that's very maintainable and understandable. However, someone not as familiar and not as comfortable with ProcSQL may look at that code and think that's not maintainable, it's not understandable. For efficiency, how do we rate efficiency? If we look at the program and go, well, that looks pretty efficient, but when we run it, how long should it take? If it takes 2 hours, should it take an hour and a half? Should it take about 2 hours? Or how much of the system resources should it use? Unless we have a baseline for this, it's difficult to rate. And as a result, the results from the testing can be very much depend on the assessor. However, I've said we should look at software quality factors. However, testing them is very difficult. But if we do test them, however we test them, we're likely to get results which will improve our programs. Previously mentioned, maintainability and understandability have strong links. This is not the only set of factors that affect each other. Many of the factors have positive and negative effects on the others. For example, a highly efficient program is often not the most maintainable or understandable. It's a highly tweaked program. It can be very difficult to insert new code or in a way that keeps it efficient. A robust program may contain extra, potentially unnecessary code to check for anomalies. So code that processes and outputs for the dirty data, or any code that's looking at whether those macro variables are populated in the right way, that's code that isn't needed for the actual output. So it's extra processing. It's an extra use of resource, and that decreases efficiency. The most efficient way to do it is to only run each line of code that we need. Large investment in factors such as reusability or portability are going to take longer. They're not necessarily required for the minimal that we need. So they will take longer than not making the program portable, or can. So they can have a negative impact on timeliness. On the whole, overcompensation on one factor has detrimental effects on others. So it becomes a case of balancing your program. With the factors interacting and competing, creating the right balance. So what makes a good program? Well, there is no one single answer. It's the right balance of the right factors for the right task in the right situation will yield a good program. And in achieving this, we will have a greater chance if considered if, during the planning stage, assessing exactly what quality means for this task. We can come up with a program quality specification, which isn't necessarily more documentation for us to do. It could just be a plan on a quick note on a scrap of paper or in your head. It's not the same as our normal specs, which are what to create, but this is more how to create it. I'll move on to some examples. Analysis dataset development potentially could be utilized across many studies within the project. A possible software quality balance could be the following. Now, this is my interpretation of the task. This can be different for each person. It's what quality means for that person for that particular task. So in this, I've put a high level of correctness, medium efficiency. We're creating an analysis data set which the code will be used across many studies. So we want a bit of efficiency there. We don't want to completely ignore it. Understandability and maintainability relatively high. Other people need to be able to pick this up. It's sitting at a level where we don't know what's coming up on these future studies. So other people should be able to pick it up and add it to it. Timeliness, I've put about medium here, so about deadline. However, this is not as important. I prefer to ensure that the understandability and maintainability is there to a level that it can be used across the project, rather than get it out a week earlier. Very high level of robustness to ensure that future data can be used, and future visits, future parameters, future tests. A relatively high level of reusability in case this needs to be moved down or moved over, and a little bit of thought to portability. Second case study is an urgent health authority request. Questions from the health authority with very tight timelines. So here, very different to the last set of importance given to quality factors. Here, very high level of correctness and very high level of timeliness. A little bit of efficiency, not very much. If we need to get the health authority request out within out in a minimal time frame, if it's very inefficient and we have to run this more than once, then it's going to eat into our time. So just ensuring that it's not really inefficient. Relatively low levels of understandability and maintainability, just in case we need to pick it up, someone needs to do something with it. And the remaining robustness, reusability and portability are all very low. The third case study is a unique specialized output, not previously done before, developing on large data sets for part of a clinical study report. And again, this is going in the clinical study report, so higher level of correctness. Lots of attention to efficiency as these large data sets are in there. Medium levels of understandability and maintainability. It's a very unique specialized output, so we need to ensure that other people can use this in case it comes up. Relatively high level of timeliness, although not looking to get it out majorly early, prefer to ensure that efficiency is there. And medium levels of robustness, reusability, and a little bit of thought to portability. As mentioned, this may be very different to other people's interpretation of quality for this program. And these are quite general case studies. Once we have actual specific examples on projects and in experience, then these should be a lot easier to devise. Thank you very much.